Hello, my name is Luke Green. I have also been called Thriftland, and this is going to be another rant for me. This is not one of my special snowflake rants, and it's obviously not one of my Let's Plays. I chose this generic background of a bunch of dice just because I'm going to do a general gaming rant, and I rather decided I was going to show you something other than my ugly face on it, like my other gaming rants, most of which were written around the same time I was developing Divine Blood, and thus are focused on Divine Blood. That said, what I'm going to be talking today is something that I've referred to as flavor gating. At this point, I'm not entirely sure where I first heard that term, and it might be very likely that the term came up, it just came up in my head at one point, and I used it because it made sense. That's how terms come to be. After all, they just some of them get popular and some of them don't. Now, what I mean by flavor gating is that certain to maintain a flavor to a campaign, to maintain a flavor to a certain setting, you make some abilities harder to get than others. Either they cost more points, or they require a higher level, or they require a specific class, or something along those lines. Now, the problem there is no problem with that in and of itself. Every game does it. Every game needs to do it in order to maintain the flavor it desires. And by nature, in order, some things in a system are going to be harder than others to maintain the sense of drama and tension and other such things. However, in a lot of cases, especially with older games, flavor gating can be mistaken as a balance issue, and you get cases where people think certain powers or abilities are overpowered to have at the beginning. Now, I come from Champions, first edition Champions. This is like third, maybe fourth edition. I come from first edition Champions as the first actual role playing game I sat down and played as it was intended to be played. Now, I was making up games using the D&D first edition books checked out of the library well before that. When I was as young as 8 years old, I was making card games and board games out of the D&D first edition books. But the first game I played was Champions, so that should be something. Now, to put in perspective, the first edition Dungeons and Dragons game was created by people who were initially war gamers. And a lot of the initial campaigns were very much PvP, very much player versus player, and the GM was rather more of a referee rather than setting the story. The players were creating the story on their own and were countering each other. They were creating factions, they were going against each other. It was very much like a battle. And you would have limits on who could get, like you would have the characteristic limits on paladin or ranger and other such things, because being able to roll up getting lucky enough to roll up a stat with the right requirements was like, in this slide came up a little early, um, getting a rare out of a booster pack for Magic or some other role playing game. Another way they artificially controlled the popularity of some things was like they created level limits for non-humans, which still doesn't make sense to me, because a elf that can live for 1,000 years can only get to level 11 as a wizard, but a human who can live 100, maybe a lot more than that if they get the right magic, can get all the way up to 20 or above. That never made sense to me, but it was done to make some class characteristics more popular than others. And another thing to put into perspective is that in the original campaigns, when they were developing the game, there was a player character who was a vampire, and the cleric class was apparently expressly put together to counter this player who was a vampire. And this was before they decided that the default way to play Dungeons and Dragons was where the game master is running most of the world, and the players are an intrepid group of mercenaries and heroes, or heroes the way we know the game today. And then you move into second edition, and they loosened up a lot of things. They made more multi-class combinations possible. The level limits all went up into the double digits, but the level limits still existed, and they still didn't make any sense to me. I understand why they were doing it, because again, they were trying to artificially control the rarity of things in the gameplay. Uh, I understand that. It's just not a game style I prefer. Now, what comes after that is third edition, and a lot of people think that third edition was influenced by MMOs that were coming out at the time, like EverQuest, which did come out a little bit before third edition, and it you can definitely see some influence in the third edition stuff in the way uh, based off EverQuest, but EverQuest itself was influenced almost directly off of the Dungeons and Dragons, and realized that the EverQuest is not the first graphical MMO. The first graphical MMO was Neverwinter Nights in 1991, and it was played using the game engine that was done for. And yes, I did leave Facebook on. I apologize. And Neverwinter Nights was done using the Goldbox game engine that was done for Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds, the Dragonlance games, and just so you know, yes, I am old enough to have played Neverwinter Nights when it came out. I didn't keep an account or anything because I wasn't really interested. Um, but yes, the first graphical D&D, the first graphical MMO was Neverwinter Nights. It was entirely based off Dungeons and Dragons. And a lot of people think the balance issues, making things more equal to each other, came out of the MOO period where it's more important. But really, the balance issues in MMO were addressed because of complaints about balance that already existed in the hobby long before there was an MMO. So you get to third edition and they start talking about how it's balanced, how everybody will be equal to each other. But in third edition, they started hiding the imbalance and doing it deliberately because Monty Cook had this idea that if you bought all the books, you deserved to be rewarded for being able to pick out which options were the best. It was basically introducing pay to play into tabletop gaming, and it was insipid. Now, one of the common complaints, and I should have saved this for later, but it's really started picking up in third edition because this is the first edition of D&D where you could play a mage that could use swords without being an elf, or a dual class, which was really hard. Or in the first time you could get a mage that could be wearing plate mail without those options, if you did the right thing. Because now humans could multi-class too. And a lot of complaint goes into wizards wearing full armor. And to be perfectly honest, that's a silly complaint. Um, Wizards and spellcasters have always had comparably comparable methods of getting high AC, and some would say even better methods of getting high AC. And by third edition, the cleric was just as powerful, magically speaking, as a wizard, and they had access to full plate armor if they full heavy armor if they wanted to. So there, but the general thing is a wizard's not generally going to have a high strength, so getting that armor is going to weigh them down a lot, make their carry capacity a lot lower, make uh, cause a lot of other things. There were a lot of other elements to the armor besides arcane spell failure, which is really unnecessary, that made heavy armor unappealing to wizards, and the effort to take to get to it was kind of silly. But there were always they think like wizards can't have high AC. Wizards have always had high AC. Sorry, they always have. Same as fighters. They just don't have the hit points. Now, on to 4th edition. A lot of flack is given to 4th edition for being cookie cutter classes. They really weren't. There was a lot of difference in the gameplay of each. What the problem with 4E was is they didn't finish it as per a role playing game. They got it up to being a tactical war game, a small unit war game, and it was basically they got it to where they could sell miniatures and they stopped. There were a lot of ideas in 4th edition that have made it into 5th edition that were really, really good. In fact, there were some ideas in 4th edition that appear somewhat in Pathfinder, including at-will spellcasting abilities that aren't horrible, like some of the cantrips being at will rather than limited per day. Which goes to Pathfinder. Pathfinder was a lot of people disagreeing with 4E, and the problem with 4E was it changed too much of the flavor, and it attacked a lot of the from perspective of us who have long time enjoyed settings like Faerun, it attacks long held settings. So people came up with Pathfinder to go to the flavor they preferred, But Pathfinder suffers from a lot of the problems that 3E has, including the deliberate imbalance that was put in by Monty Cook, even though they tried to fix it. You get to 5E and they start rebuild it from scratch again, trying to take the best elements they liked out of all the classes, all the different previous editions, the simplicity and directness of the first edition with the balance of the fourth edition and doing things at will, things like the ritual casting, the automatically progressing skills, stuff like that out of fourth edition, the flexibility out of third edition. It'll get better as it goes along, but basically, in general, the default idea in D&D is you start with a bunch of people who are farmers or whatever, or they're new to the idea of adventuring. It's not so much in fifth edition. In fifth edition, where you have backgrounds, you're already a veteran in some cases. You're already an exceptional person by first level, but still you are exceptional but comparable to the other people around, and then you become like these guys. And that was Facebook again. I apologize. I'm going to close that. And by the end of a campaign, you are a lot stronger than you were when you began. And you started out with those farmers, and you come back as these great heroes who have faced off demons and all that. And they started off with they've never seen a magic spell in their life, and then they get where magic's an everyday coincidence. And before you realize, the accomplishments up there above the heads is from the books, not the movies. So the movies kind of changed a lot of things. Like they decide, I guess Peter Jackson decided that people wouldn't believe it if a hobbit could kill an orc or a troll chieftain on their own. So you never saw Merry and Pippin go to town on orcs as much as happened in the book. Because yeah, Merry is noted as having removed several limbs. Now, again, I come from superheroes, where all the options are available to you all at the beginning of the thing. You have champions. This current edition, the original edition, you had 250 points. The current edition, you have 400 points. It sounds like it's more, and it kind of is. It allows you to make a more well-rounded character with more role-playing elements. But in general, it doesn't really raise the bar up above what you were able to do at 250, except for being able to round out a character. Um, Now, so if I were running Hero System, I would know from the get-go that I could be facing people walking through walls. I could be facing people teleporting. I could be facing people flying, reading minds, whatnot. And in most cases, they would not have a limited number of times per day. Uh, there is now this sounds completely different from D&D, but really the tools that you have in D&D to deal with teleportation, flight, and all that aren't any different from the tools you have in Champions. It's just that in D&D, we are used to using pre-made tools in the forms of the official monsters, the official classes, and all the official magic items. So we are used to the idea of specific powers only coming in at a higher level and are aligned with high level hit points and damages. Now in a superhero thing, it's possible for both the Legion of Justice League and the Avengers to be a starting campaign point. And powers like shape-shifting, like Mystique has, are perfectly easy to be balanced in. You just know the player has them, so you design your plot and your challenges around it. So it is perfect. You don't have this problem where in D&D, reliable shape-shifting is only available to a handful of classes, and then only at a higher level, usually, like 14th level for a druid. Um, but like same with teleportation, there is significant advantages to being able to teleport 30 feet every round as adverse be having to walk 30 feet every round. Mostly you would skip past difficult terrain, wouldn't be a thing. Opportunity attacks wouldn't be a thing as much. But it's not a significant enough advantage that it's unplayable. Um, it is perfectly possible for me to make a dragon class such that the dragon here is a PC and the wizard is the villain. This is it's perfectly possible to design this in D&D to have a first level balanced dragon. Yes, you can do that. you would have to homebrew, and the problem would be is it would break the flavor expectations for a lot of people, because even if the dragon itself has the same hit points as the first level character, about I would say maybe a D12 or a D10 would probably be likely, and it would probably be a lot smaller, and a lot of other things. The general truth is people don't expect dragons to be PCs in Dungeons and Dragons. Therefore, if you let a player be a dragon in a Dungeons and Dragons game, it doesn't matter what their story is. It doesn't matter the fact that you make sure that they're not unbalanced compared to the other players. Some people might be rubbed the wrong way. It depends on your group. If you're in a group that plays a lot of different systems, including systems that allow for a lot of different concepts like Hero System, Big Eyes, Small Mouth, OVA, Fate, GURPS, Savage Worlds, Powered by the Apocalypse, or any of a number of other systems that have different sacred cows or not so many sacred cows, um, as D&D, because it has been around for a long time, and a lot of these flavor things have been misidentified as balance or power issues over time. Then you can have a group that say, okay, yeah, you can play a dragon, no problem, as long as that would not be a problem for some groups. But for most groups, the average D&D group, the one that has been playing just D&D and is used to D&D, that would be breaking their expectations. It would look like favoritism to allow someone to play a dragon, because then they would start thinking, well, why didn't I play a dra- don't get a why don't I get to play a dragon? And the answer is you didn't ask. And some people would say that the these things need to be rare. They shouldn't be player character things. And this is one of my big gripes with Dungeons and Dragons. Very often in Dungeons and Dragons, you have in the fiction or in the modules or whatever, you have a really interesting character who is completely impossible to play as a PC unless you homebrew the hell out of it. And that really annoys me, because I think that if you have a character with an interesting story, the best way to delve into the story of an interesting character is to do it as a PC rather than an NPC who won't get near the focus. And to make it impossible for that interesting story to be done as a PC just seems to me a betrayal of the thing. That's my opinion. That's me being antsy. I know it's a flavor thing. I could easily do that story in another system that could just as easily handle that unusual character concept. But yeah, so when I hear things like complaining about wizards wearing armor, or a race getting fly at the start, or any of a number of these things in D&D, um, realize that the the tools you have as a DM to balance out abilities at first level are the same as the tools you have at the upper level, because you can always make your own monsters. You can always make your own challenges. In D&D, we are spoiled for pre-made tools. So we're not used to having to do that work on our own if you only play D&D. And so, since teleportation is something you usually only see with high hit die things, with high hit points and all that, it seems like it's overpowered to see it at first level when it really isn't. It is an advantage, but not any more significant advantage than like the high elves getting a free wizard's cantrip. Um, but yeah, that is where we have flavor gating, and every game does it. Even I have done it. I in when I was transferring Strands of Fate powers for Divine Blood, I took the healing power and rose it to 6, which makes it almost impossible that anybody's ever going to be able to emulate it with any of the channeling or magic powers, because you have to have the right ability score to be 6 or over to emulate the healing, the flat out healing. And in most campaigns, that maximum is going to be 4. In some campaigns, it will be 5, and there is an advantage which will let you go 1 over the maximum. But in most campaigns, people aren't going to be able to do the best version of healing, and to get the best version of healing, you basically have to have been born with it or do it as a ritual. Um, but there are lesser versions. One's the accelerate metabolism, and one is the exchange, where you heal one thing, but you take some of the damage onto yourself, or you heal yourself but put damage to somebody else, back and forth. Um, those are cheaper, but the pure out clerical style healing is expensive deliberately in my game because I didn't want it to be very common. And teleportation is blocked to specific races again because I didn't want it to be very common. And there aren't many races that start with flight as a basic ability in Divine Blood because again I didn't want it to be a very common ability. Um, but so flavor gating is not bad. It's just a matter of realizing that it is not a power issue. It is a matter of making the game setting look like the story you want to tell.